What is up, guys? Welcome to a video that I will, I don't know how I'm going to title it, but what I am going to get at here is that Warrior Spellbreaker can be viable in PvE. I hope this microphone is getting me through. Warrior Spellbreaker can be viable in PvE, and actually a lot more than viable. I think it can actually be very, very good. I don't know about raiding. I can't say anything about raiding. For one thing, I don't raid. But
the council made the
as
right
far
call.
as open world, as far as fractals, of course everything is viable in open world PvE. But fractals, oh yeah, it can be very, very good. And I want to show you the build that I have been using on Spellbreaker, because I main warrior, and Spellbreaker, I was just born to be Spellbreaker. My character is named Spiritus Mage Hunter, so it makes perfect sense. So, first of all, I got dual daggers, alright? Dual daggers are on every single Spellbreaker build that I run, okay? There are a few different options for how you want to take this, how you want to take Spellbreaker. You can make it very glassy and do a lot more damage, or you can sacrifice a little bit of your damage and then become more tough, more tanky. So I've got, here we go, I'm gonna look at my armor here. I have all exotic armor, okay? I do have ascended weapons and mostly ascended accessories and everything like that. But the armor is exotic, so it's high accessibility, really. Also, the daggers, the first one's Silence of 1,000 Years, so if you're a Spellbreaker, you're gonna have access to that. With assassin stats, I believe all of these are assassin stats. Yes, assassins. So power, precision, ferocity. This is the main one that I run, and it's because I prefer to play very, very glassy, and I find that it really works. It really works out very well. You do so. I do so much damage, and it's not so much damage necessarily, because I know people that run raids are gonna just be miles ahead of me. But it's that, especially with the stuff that is in Path of Fire, it's very it's catered to where Spellbreakers can easily play around with that stuff in PvE, and also in fractals when they apply random boons and stuff. So as far as runes, we've got Superior Rune of the Spellbreaker. This increases power and precision, which is really good, and then you also do 7% more damage to foes that have no boons. Well, Spellbreaker excels at removing boons, so it's insanely good. I'm actually gonna mute Guild Wars 2 because I'm kind of paranoid about it making too much noise. Okay, so so we've got the runes of the Spellbreaker. These are not that expensive. I don't think they're that expensive. Let me just check really quick. Rune of the Spellbreaker, just so I can give you an up-to-date price. Very cheap. Also, runes of the Eagle. They also help. I use Rune of the Spellbreaker because it's very thematic. It really fits my personality with the class and everything. Okay, so it's about 2 gold per rune. And then for sigils, okay, so for weapon sigils, we've got the Superior Sigil of Accuracy, which gives you an extra 7% critical chance. And then we've got the Superior Sigil of Severance, which is where when you interrupt an enemy, you gain extra precision and ferocity, which is so good. I mean, it's just so good. And it's only 4 seconds, but it really, really helps. So, as you can see, you can look at this right here. My critical chance, and this is without Fury. Okay, with Fury, it's going to be 94%, 94.5%, which is insane. Almost every single one of your hits is going to be crits. Then with the Ferocity, your critical damage is 191%, almost 192%, which means most of your hits are actually going to do close to double damage. Add to that the fact that the Dagger Auto Attack does more damage on critical hit. It does an extra 15% damage, which means I think that adds additively. So it's going to be doing more than double damage. And then if you have some kind of Fury on you, it's insane. So where every single one of your hits is just doing an insane amount of damage. Okay, yeah, so it really works out. The health is only 19,000, which it could get much higher with Warrior, but we'll take a look at traits in a second. So, like I said, with skills, I've got the double daggers. This applies to every one of my Spellbreaker builds, so if you're interested in that, then double daggers is a must. Second, I have Greatsword. Now, Greatsword is only useful for one of the builds that I have available. Greatsword is usually if I'm in open world PvE. I can switch over to it. I can do really well at applying might because of Forceful Greatsword, especially with 100 blades. It really helps. So, and then of course the sigil. I already have the sigil of accuracy again. I do not have the sigil of severance again because the Greatsword can't really interrupt. But the Superior Sigil of Air for now is good. I might change that, but we'll see. That's also Berserker. The daggers are actually the other Silence of a Thousand Years. That one's not Berserker. That's Power, Precision, Toughness. I don't remember what stat combination that is called. But anyway, it's Bygarth's Razor. But Assassins works too. Assassins works insanely well. As you can see, I still have very high crit chance with the Greatsword because it's adding 171 precision, whereas I'm getting a little bit more here. Anyway, the point is, you know, Greatsword is good for adding a little bit of damage as well as stacking up might. And if you have might makes right, then all of that might is getting a passive heal, sort of a passive heal. So that's really good. Another version of this build that I have is where you use an axe and an axe and a warhorn. And I use this primarily in fractals. You have to combine certain traits with it, but so I'm just kind of preparing you guys for this. But yeah, so axe and warhorn is something I like to do. If I need more crowd control, then I will do mace and warhorn, and then you get a couple of those. This stuns them, and then the pommel bash also stuns them, and then plus full counter is always a stun. So, you know, it's a little bit of extra crowd control. It's not a lot, but it's something to help if that's what you need. So back to the Greatsword. So let's take a look at the other skills. We've got natural healing. I just love how insanely powerful this healing skill is. I see a lot of Spellbreakers running Healing Signet, and that's valid. I would say that that is very valid, especially if you've got the Signet Mastery and stuff that applies the Signet of Ferocity. However, okay, 2,300 heal is just not good enough for me. It's just not good enough. It does heal 382 per second, but it's just, to me, it's just not enough. I find myself dying so much more quickly, especially on a glassy build with like all this assassin's gear. It's just, it's too glassy. So I prefer the natural healing, and plus it's a good Condi cleanse. Very, very effective. Second, with nearly every Spellbreaker build that I run, I almost always run Featherfoot Grace. It is such a lifesaver. There are times when an enemy will stun me, and I'm very close to death, and I could just pop Featherfoot Grace, and then I can just dash away, and I'm not being affected by any bleeding or burning or whatever for 5 whole seconds. That allows me to get out of there, and then I can pop natural healing and heal myself for like more than 60% of my health. That might be exactly 60%, I don't know. No, that's more than 60% because I've got less than 20,000 health. Anyway, then I've got Break Enchantments. This is really, really good for when they've got some extra boons on them that you just need to strip away. And it's really good because it does quite a bit of damage. It's compared to the dagger auto attack, it's going to do almost 1,000 damage, and the dagger auto attack is going to do, actually, you're doing about the same damage, but you're also going to be removing a bunch of boons, so it's really helpful. Next I have Dolyak's Signet. It helps a little bit with how squishy you tend to be in this build. It adds some toughness when you need it, and then when you activate it, if you've got Signet Mastery, you get the extra ferocity, and also it breaks your stuns. So I use this in PvP actually. It's really useful if you've like downed an enemy, and then You can use the Dolyak Signet and then proceed to finish them off so that they don't use one of those really annoying knockdown skills before you finish them off. So that's good. Open world, I sometimes run Winds of Disenchantment. This is definitely a must if you're doing PvP. Winds of Disenchantment is just by far completely necessary. If you're running PvE, it's kind of situational, really. It depends on how many boons that your foe is using. I have used this on particularly boon spammy bounties in Path of Fire, and it does very well. Occasionally in Fractals, you can use it to revive an ally and to where you're not vulnerable to projectiles. So in that way, it has its uses. But the 90-second cooldown really kind of it hurts it there. I thought I remember reading an old functionality where foes within the field cannot receive boons, and allies within the field cannot receive conditions. That might be kind of overpowered, but it might more justify the 90-second cooldown. So, I don't know. But anyway, it's kind of situational. Other times, I run Signet of Might. This is a good one to run. Sorry, Signet of Rage. Signet of Rage is a pretty good all-around elite skill. You can run it with a lot of builds, and you know, the extra boons that you can apply to yourself, and it's only on a 48-second cooldown, plus the extra ferocity, and then plus, keep in mind, you're granting yourself Fury, so you're gonna have a 94.5% chance to crit. So, yeah, I mean that's just so good. How can you even pass that up? And then passively, you're going to gain adrenaline, which is really useful for doing your burst skills and especially your full counter. I don't ever run Rampage. I don't really see any viability to use this with Spellbreaker, plus it doesn't really fit the theme anyway. Battle Standard I sometimes run in Fractals. Actually, usually I run this one in Fractals, because sometimes when your party is about to wipe, it will occasionally come in a lot of handy. I think it has a lot of usefulness, I think, when you're in a Fractal and your party is about to wipe but everybody's just down, and you can just pop this thing and it revives everybody in that range. And then also you're getting Fury again, so don't forget about the Fury. The Fury is going to come in so much handy with the critical hits, because it allows you to do nearly double damage. It's just so insane. So, those are my skills. Let's go ahead and look at traits here. This is not something I run all the time. This is just something I'm running right now, and I do like to experiment here. But it's just, you know, I love the Spellbreaker, and so I end up experimenting a lot. And so, let's take a look at this. So, first of all, I'm running Strength. A lot of the builds that I use involving Spellbreaker involve Strength. It's just so good. The Restorative Strength that grants you Might after you use Natural Healing, it's really good, because you're cleansing all of your boons and your conditions, but then you end up with 5 extra Might. So, it's really good. Sometimes you can combine that with Phalanx Strength as well, and it's quite good with that one. I usually don't use any other trait in this area. Forceful Greatsword is good for getting lots of Might, because when you gain a critical hit, you grant Might, and combine this with Phalanx Strength, and I've easily been able to gain all of my allies up to 25 Might so easily. Especially if you can find some way to grant Quickness, it's so good. I mean, it's insanely good how quickly you can stack up Might. Occasionally I will use Body Blow if I need some extra conditions. Perhaps if I'm running Mace, then I will occasionally run this. And then if I'm not running Mace or Greatsword, like if I'm in Fractals and I'm using the Axe and Warhorn, occasionally I'll use Great Fortitude and just gain some extra bit of health. It helps since, again, I'm not very well armored. So, but currently I'm using Forceful Greatsword. Then you've got Berserker's Power. Do this if you need a lot of damage. It's only going to be 7% damage because the Spellbreaker can only use level 1 burst skills. But at the same time, it's it's pretty good, I think. It just adds just a little bit of extra damage. Add to that you're already going to be probably getting a crit on this and removing boons. So currently I'm running Might Makes Right, where when you grant yourself Might, you heal. This is if you feel a little bit too glassy and you need some extra healing, and you can especially apply all this Might with the Great Sword. It just helps a lot. So I don't think I ever used Merciless Hammer. Now, as far as arms, what I'm running right now is Signet Mastery, which helps with the ferocity. I've dealt 13,000 damage just with skill 4 alone, Wastrel's Ruin. It is so good. I cannot even explain how good it is. But you can gain a bunch of extra ferocity, plus you're already running Doliak's Signet, so if you need some more, if you want to do super damage, then you can just pop Doliak's Signet, gain some stability, and then do the standard thing of 5, 3, 4, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But so we've got that. Opportunist is sometimes useful because it's Fury and Adrenaline when you immobilize a target, and it synergizes well with No Escape because dazes and stuns affect immobilize. So number 3 is a daze, and so is your full counter. So you immobilize them, and then you can gain Fury, and then you're gaining a whole bunch of extra crits. So very useful there. I never do Wounding Precision because that has to do with condition damage, and I'm just not a fan of condition builds. So with this one, this is increased critical damage, critical chance against disabled foes of 50%. But here's the thing. You're already, if you have Fury, you're already at almost 100%. So you never need to take this. It's just so good. Okay, Rending Strikes is a chance to cause vulnerability on critical hits. This is good because you're doing just more and more damage. And you're getting so many critical hits. So about 1 in every 3 hits is going to inflict vulnerability for 10 seconds. And you can get a lot of hits. Especially with Blade Storm. Which is another thing. So, hold on, what is this? Swiftness? I don't know why that says it. I don't know why that says it gives you swiftness. But anyways, I don't use Blade Master because I don't have any builds that use a sword. Burst Precision, you don't even need to do this because you're already going to most likely have a critical hit on your burst skill. Furious is where you gain bonus adrenaline and condition damage. Condition damage kind of makes this not worth it, in my opinion. If they gave you a stack of like power or perhaps ferocity, then it would probably make it useful. However, just the 1 extra adrenaline per critical hit is not as useful, not nearly as useful as dual wielding. And dual wielding is insanely good for the Spellbreaker because if you're using dual daggers, it's just an automatic 20% extra damage, or basically 20% extra damage because you're attacking 20% faster. So it is so good. So with this particular build, what I'm using is Pure Strike because many times in PvE, your foes are going to be boonless anyway. So you're getting an extra 14% critical damage. Keep in mind, now look at this, look how well this stacks. 14% if they're boonless, plus an extra 15% from the dagger auto attack is 29%. Added on to your 191% that you already have from your ferocity. And then you're also getting extra ferocity because of the Signet of Ferocity. So you're just dealing these insanely damaging hits, critical hits, and it's so good. As for the next one, I have Sun and Moon Style, and this is some passive healing. It also gives you access to quickness, which quickness is so good for the Spellbreaker. It makes you attack even faster. As far as I know, I could be wrong, but it's just so good. I just love it. And I'm also running Revenge Counter, so the full counter does more damage. It also grants you some resistance, and it copies conditions. In PvE, and also PvP, of course, you will be subject to many conditions. And if you use the Revenge Counter, you can just copy it on them, and kind of punish them for inflicting conditions on you, which is just so cool to me. And so this is kind of a general kind kind of catch-all build that I will run that will get me through pretty much anything I'm going through. The double daggers and the great sword, and then as you can see these skills right here. But occasionally I run discipline, and I'm going to show you this right now. Occasionally I will run discipline and use vengeful return, because if you get downed, then you need to be sure that that vengeance is going to help you rally. So that's always useful. And then after that, you're going to want, if you're using the battle standard, then you probably want to use the inspiring battle standard to heal your allies in addition, and so it grants them regeneration. It's going to heal them for 7,800 total. That's pretty good. So, but if you're not running the banner, then you can instead choose Destruction of the Empowered, which means that you do more damage versus them if they do have boons, but you also do more damage against them if they don't have boons. So that's really, it's good for when you can't seem to keep all of the boons off of them. Next, if you're running the axe for the fractals, then you could choose Axe Mastery, and of course the extra ferocity is also always welcome. The heightened focus is really good because quickness is just so useful. But burst mastery is also good, where the burst skills restore some of the adrenaline, and then also do 7% more damage. That is very useful, I think. So yes, so that's the discipline thing. All three of these are really viable. This is only viable when you're using a banner, and this is viable if you're not using a banner. This is the only viable one if you're not using banner. Otherwise, I'm not a huge fan of discipline, and I usually don't run discipline. Sometimes you can use warrior sprint and you can move faster. I mean, it's kind of situational. I think swiftness is a mostly useless boon unless you're just trying to run around an open world. Okay, so as I said before, sometimes I will run a warhorn. Sometimes I will run an axe and warhorn, and when I do so, I always run tactics. And the tactics line is so good because this allows you to have some team condition removal with quick breathing. The other one doesn't really. The other ones don't really impress me that much. But the quick breathing is so cool because it allows you to like keep up almost permanent swiftness on them with the warhorn, as well as remove conditions. Just very useful in fractals, so you can help support your allies in fractals. Next is Empower Allies. It's just a permanent 150 power bonus for allies in your radius. Like, it's just so good. And then usually after that I use Failing Strength, because if you're using Forceful Greatsword, then not only are you healing yourself with Might Makes Right, but you're also applying might to you and your party. So, very useful. And then as far as everything else, I don't run defense. Honestly, I do not run defense. I don't really see that much of a use for it. So I will just leave it at here. And so it's time to talk about some other skills here. I have mentioned that I always use either Winds of Disenchantment, occasionally Battle Standard, and sometimes Signet of Rage. If you feel that you have enough support to where you won't die very often, then you can change out Dolyak's Signet for instead Signet of Fury if you want more critical hits, which brings your critical chance up to 83%. Now, you're not really going to generally need this. This is really for the other armor sets, which I will talk about in a second. This is really for the other armor sets involving the builds, which do not provide a precision bonus, and so you might need this for extra critical hits. And 83 is probably above where you want to be, because that means that when you have Fury, you're wasting that 3%, because it's going above 100%, so you don't really need that. But it does provide a good source of adrenaline for when you're just really low on adrenaline. Maybe sometimes I think there are some pretty good builds to be had where you can just kind of spam burst skills using full counter. So that might be good. If you're not interested in more critical hits, you can go Signet of Might, which will just provide you with just flat out more power, and you know that's always going to be useful. You can also use Signet of Stamina if you feel that you need some more Conti Cleanse, because this will add a little bit more defensiveness to the build. But it's an alternative to Dolyak Signet. So it's not a straight up armor boost, it's just giving you more opportunities to dodge, and then also if you have too many conditions you can cleanse it with Signet of Stamina. Generally I don't use this because natural healing fills the role pretty well. Occasionally what I will do is I will run 4 Great Justice, and that will grant you Fury, which will of course increase your critical hit chance a lot. So to you and your allies, it really helps with might generation if that's what you need. Other than that, I will run Banner of Discipline for the extra precision and ferocity, so you get extra, there you go. You get 203% critical damage and 82% critical chance. Very, very good. A great bonus to be under. But generally, what I'm running is Featherfoot Grace and Break Enchantments. It's just too good. Now, as far as the rotation, this is probably, this is second to last thing I want to talk about. This video has become actually a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I hope this is helpful information for other warrior mains. What I generally do is when I go up to an enemy, I will use 5, and I will start him out with Bladestorm. And the reason I do this is that, first of all, out of all the dagger skills, it's got the longest cooldown. It's got 20 seconds. Second of all, it inflicts a total of 14% or 14 stacks of vulnerability. And that's going to be really useful for what I do afterwards. So you get the, first of all, you get the longest cooldown started right away so that you can just have that running. Then you use 3 to daze them. And after you daze them, then you can use Wastrel's Ruin. See, if they're dazed, they're not using a skill, which means you're going to use Wastrel's Ruin and you're going to do a ton of damage. It's just a crap ton of damage. It's so much. And by the time you do that, you most likely will have enough adrenaline to do Breaching Strike. So you do that, you remove some boons. In this case, I'm gaining some extra endurance back. You remove some boons, you gain, you do a lot of damage. It's like 3 times, almost 3 times the auto attack, which is really good. It's about the same as Wastrel's Ruin without the damage increase, so it's like half the damage of that. But then after you do that, then you full counter, which will recharge your burst skill. So then you can build up some more adrenaline using probably Aura Slicer, which will slow them down. And then when you have enough adrenaline, then you can do Breaching Strike again and remove more boons. And of course, auto attacks in between and whatnot. Okay, so that's generally the rotation. With the other weapons, you can kind of do what you want. You kind of figure out the rotation for yourself, because those are already well known. So if I am going to be playing in a fractal where I really need to remove a lot of boons, then I will go Loss Aversion instead of Sun and Moon style, because generally I get enough support in fractals where I don't need that extra bit of passive healing. I will go Loss Aversion, which makes you do extra damage when you remove boons. Now let's take a look at all these boon removals. First of all, when you stun or daze, or whatever involving CC, you remove a boon. So there's 1. Which means your dagger skill 3 will remove a boon. Second of all, your Breaching Strike will remove a boon, and because your full counter is a daze, your full counter will also remove a boon. I think there's that, and then there's also Break Enchantments. Break Enchantments also removes boons, so every single time you do one of those things, you're removing boons. And every time you remove a boon, you get this unblockable damage thing that they're getting, and it's not a lot, but it's something. It's extra damage when you're removing boons. Very, very good. And then I will also tend to run either Revenge Counter for the conditions and of course the damage for full counter, or Enchantment Collapse if I'm going to be trying to remove boons from a lot of enemies, in which case you can, like, in which case this Disrupting Stab actually usually removes 2 boons. I don't remember exactly if this is the reality of it, but as far as what I can remember, Disrupting Stab will then remove 2 boons. Break Enchantments will remove 3. Your Burst will remove 3. As far as I remember, I might be wrong on that. And then sometimes I just want to go full defensive, and so I will run Guard Counter, which gives me protection, Slow Counter, which provides cripple and slow, and then Revenge Counter, which does more damage, copies other conditions. And then also, I will run Leg Specialist, which makes you inflict Immobilize when you cripple them. Remember, your full counter is now applying Cripple. So, you're applying Cripple and Slow to them, plus you're applying Immobilize. You're copying 5 of your conditions onto them, doing more damage with your full counter, and then after that, you're getting protection on yourself. Very, very useful. You can also do No Escape if you want that Immobilize and you don't want to take Tactics. Perhaps you also want to take Quick Breathing, so then you could just do this Immobilize instead, to where it's a Dazes and Stuns inflict Immobilize, which means that your full counter is going to inflict Immobilize anyway because it's a Daze. So, and remember, you're copying all these conditions out to up to 5 targets around you. It's so, so good. So that's really all there is to it. As far as the different armor sets, I will show you. I've got a few different sets. The type I usually run is Assassins, but I've also been experimenting with, I believe it's Soldiers, and with Runes of the Dolyak, which gives you a ton of vitality and also some toughness. So you're actually going to get up to, if you use a certain trait, you can get up to like 25,000 health, which is really good, plus a tiny bit of regeneration. So you sacrifice some DPS, but it's a little more tanky, a little less squishy. So you can do that. So that's really it. You could perhaps run Knights if you want the extra critical hits and you don't care as much about Ferocity, if you have some other ways of getting it. But that's pretty much it for this build. I hope you enjoyed. If you really got some benefit out of this, then just let me know in the comments or whatever. If you think I should do a different guide for warrior mains, then feel free to let me know. But in the meantime, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.